Okay, so this PowerPoint presentation I call the architectural registration process. This is what you have to do if you want to become a registered or licensed architect in the state of Texas. Each state has its own requirements for what it takes to become registered in that state, but they're all pretty similar from state to state. I'm a registered architect here in Texas, so that's what I want to speak about today. What the process is if you want to become a registered architect here in the state of Texas. The very first thing that you need to begin the process is a master's degree from a NAB accredited university. NAB is an organization. NAB stands for National Architectural Accrediting Board. So in order to get a master's degree in architecture, you first need a bachelor's degree in architecture from a NAB accredited school. So for step one, get a master's degree in architecture, which really means get a bachelor's degree in architecture first, and then go on and pursue your master's degree. And it does have to be at a NAB accredited school. There are some architecture programs out there that are not NAB accredited. So you need to make sure that the program that you're transferring into is NAB accredited. Here in the state of Texas, we have uh, eight public or eight universities that are NAB accredited, and that's listed right here. UTA over in Arlington, NAB accredited architecture program. Texas Tech in Lubbock, UT down in Austin, University of Texas at San Antonio, also NAB accredited, University of Houston, Rice University, Texas A&M, and Prairie View A&M. And then this is a website. I'm not going to go into this website here, but if you download this PowerPoint presentation, click on this website, and this just gives you a list of all the universities in Texas that are NAB accredited. But it also gives you contact information, tells you the web page for these different universities and who the head of the program is, the address of the program, the phone number, and contact information for who to get in touch with if you're interested in transferring to any of these universities in the state. That's step one. That's the first thing. You need to get a master's degree in architecture from a NAB accredited program. Step two is what's known as the AXP. That's the Architectural Experience Program. This is a program that's administered by a group known as NCARB. The longer you're in architecture, the more programs that you'll see with a whole bunch of initials. We've already looked at NAB, we're looking at AXP, now we're looking at NCARB. NCARB is the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. They are located in Washington, D.C., and they oversee the Architectural Experience Program. This is a program designed for when you are working at an architectural firm. You need to get uh, a number of documented hours in a variety of different tasks that are done in an architectural design firm. So this is documented experience in 6 distinct areas of architectural practice under the direct supervision of a registered architect. These are the 6 different categories of work that you need to show that you've engaged in while working at an architectural design firm. Practice management. You have to have 160 documented hours in project management. The way it really works, the way this works is you'll go to work for an architectural firm, and you could do this while you're still in school. You could do this as a student internship. You could continue this as a full-time designer at an architectural firm. But basically, most firms do it like this. Uh, you have a supervisor who is a registered architect, and you get with your supervisor maybe every 2 weeks or every month or every couple of months, but you meet with this registered architect who is a supervisor of yours, and you go over the work that you've done at the firm since your last meeting with the supervisor. You log all this stuff. You document projects that you're working on, the type of work you're doing, and how many hours you're engaged in it. And you meet with your supervisor and you fill out a form saying, okay, I've done this many hours in practice management, this many hours in project management, this many hours in programming and analysis, and so forth. And you kind of discuss it with your supervisor. If your supervisor agrees with your numbers and your categories, he or she will sign the form, and then that gets sent off to NCARB. And you have a file over at NCARB where they track everything that you're doing. So what you need to do, the AXP, the Architectural Experience Program, is all about tracking these things. And this will take a couple of years. You can't do this in a few months. Getting all these hours documented will take a few years. So these are the categories that you have to have time in. Practice management, 160 hours. Project management, 360 hours. Programming and analysis, 260 hours. Project planning and design, 1,080 hours. Project development and documentation, 1,520 hours. And finally, construction and evaluation, 360 hours. So that totals 3,740 hours. I kind of added it all up and I assumed if you're working a 40-hour work week, get 2 weeks of vacation a year, that if you did nothing but these exact tasks, it would take you about 2 years to complete all these things. In reality, there's a bunch of time that you spend on the job doing other things outside of these six categories. So chances are it'll take a little bit longer than 2 years to get all of this done. Here's a little explanation of category by category, what all these things mean. So practice management, you have to have 160 documented, signed off hours in practice management. Practice management focuses on the tasks involved in running an architectural firm. Under this area, you'll gain experience in managing a business, marketing your firm, securing projects, working with clients, and sustaining a positive and professional work environment. So, when you're engaged in this, in the Architectural Experience Program, think about the tasks that you're doing and the tasks that you need to do, and think about how you can get experience in this. How are you going to get experience marketing your firm or working with clients or securing projects? You might see if you can get with those the higher ups in the architectural firm, maybe the partners or the principals, and just ask if you can tag along with them or sit in on some of their client meetings. That would count as practice management, and that would kind of allow you to see how your firm is bringing in work, is bringing in the clients, how they're marketing themselves. Project management is 360 hours. Project management focuses on delivering projects that meet your contractual requirements. So you'll be prepared to budget, coordinate, oversee, and execute a project. So project management really isn't doing the design work yet, but it's doing kind of the groundwork, the basic research, kind of compiling the numbers to assemble a budget, coordinating things, getting maybe helping to assemble a team of consultants, landscape architects, structural engineers, that kind of thing. It's the logistics of what it takes to do the prep work of getting a project off the ground. You could even say that probably maybe even doing some research into the codes that are required by whatever jurisdiction you are building your project in. You know, getting on the phone with the local city government and finding out building codes, fire codes, that sort of thing. Any kind of code related research would fall under project management, and you need to get 360 hours in that. Programming and analysis. This focuses on the first phase of a project, often referred to as pre-design. This goes back to that earlier PowerPoint presentation where I talked about the phases of a project. So programming and analysis, 260 hours in pre-design. In this experience area, you'll complete tasks related to researching and evaluating client requirements, building code and zoning regulations. Oh, I guess I said building code earlier. Maybe that falls more into this category here. Building code and zoning regulations and site data to develop recommendations on the feasibility of a project. Zoning focuses on things like um, really kind of what sort of functions are going to be going on in the building that you're designing. Usually, cities are divided up, and different regions of different cities have different things going on. There's usually a residential area, or an industrial area, or an area geared towards retail or office functions. That's what zoning entails. So that you might be doing some research with the city, making sure that whatever you're designing is compliant with the zoning requirements for that location. Project planning and design, 1,080 hours. Project planning and design focuses on the schematic design phase of a project. In this experience area, you'll learn to lay out building designs, review building codes and regulations, coordinate the schematics with your clients, with your consultants, and communicate design concepts with your client. So this is really kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of the design work right here. And they want you to get 1,080 hours of experience in project planning and design. Let's see, coordinate schematics with your consultants. That really involves taking the floor plans that you're generating and making sure that all your consultants are getting the most updated versions of your floor plans so that they can then draw over them or superimpose onto them their own component. If they have a floor plan of your building, the landscape architect knows where to put in paths and trails and different types of planting and that sort of thing. If your structural engineers have plan and section drawings of your building, they can start working out how the structural system is going to work so that it the end result, the desired end result that you, the architect, have in mind is accomplished. Uh, a question I always get from students about this is when it comes to the structural system of a building, how do you choose a structural engineer and what's the relationship between an architect and the structural engineer? What's that working relationship? In many instances, you'll use a structural engineering firm if you are designing a really big project. Chances are, if you're just designing a house or a townhouse, something small, you won't need a structural engineer. But if you're designing a big hotel complex or a big office building, you probably want to use a structural engineering firm to figure out how, the loads, the weights that the building needs to resist in order to stand up. And chances are, the firm that you're working with, the architectural firm that you're working at, probably has a good working relationship with at least a couple of different structural engineering firms. Chances are you're not just going to be picking a new structural engineering firm out of the yellow pages, but you've got someone in mind that you've worked with a number of times, and they understand the type of projects you do, and your firm understands how they tend to design structural systems. So usually you'll be working with a firm that has done a number of projects with your own firm. Basically, you as the architect don't need to know absolutely everything about structural engineering, but you do need to be educated enough in structural engineering that you can have an intelligent conversation with a structural engineer. You can express to them what your desired result for this building needs to be, and when they offer you some recommendations or some choices, you can understand what they're telling you and make a good decision as to which way to go from a structural engineering standpoint. But you, the architect, set the course. You, the architect, create the design, and then the structural engineer is paid to figure out a way to make that design work. If you're designing a 40-story tall building, you want to be able to lay out the spaces and make sure that building is compliant with all the various building codes and uh, you know means of egress or means of exiting in the event of an emergency. You need to make sure that your building is code compliant and it successfully meets the desired results of the client. The structural engineer will then take your design and figure out how to really make that work. How thick do the columns need to be? How many columns do we need? How far apart can they be spaced? What type of beams are we using? Uh, they take your vision and figure out the reality of how to make that happen. 1,520 hours will be devoted to project development and documentation. Project development and documentation focuses on projects after the schematic design has been approved. So this kind of coincides with the CD or construction documents phase of a project. NCARB in their AXP, their Architectural Experience Program, wants you to get 1,520 hours in dealing with generating construction documents. This particular area focuses on projects after the schematic design has been approved. In this area, you'll gain experience preparing construction documents and coordinating with regulatory authorities to gain the necessary approvals for construction. So you'll be preparing construction documents, and you'll be sending copies out to the local city government to get building permits and approval to do things. Um, I remember years ago working on a project in Fort Worth that was kind of adjacent to the Trinity River in Fort Worth, and we were working right next to we were building a 12-story tower next to uh, an Army Corps of Engineers levee, and the Army Corps of Engineers was really concerned about us excavating into the earth to dig out an underground parking garage right close to a levee or a big artificial embankment holding back the river. And there was all sorts of concern that if we excavated too deeply or did this improperly, that the levee would fail and the whole region that we were building in would get flooded by the Trinity River. So we had a whole lot of meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers working out how a two-story underground parking garage right next to an artificial embankment holding back the river could be excavated in a safe way without flooding the site. That also kind of coincides with this whole project development and documentation phase. Construction and evaluation, 360 hours. Construction and evaluation focuses on the construction administration, that's the CA portion, and post-construction phases of a project. This includes being out on the job site, meeting with contractors, clients, and building officials, and punching lists. This is what I talked about in the last PowerPoint presentation when I was discussing CA, construction administration. This might be the most difficult of the categories to get your hours in construction and evaluation, especially if you work for a design firm that does not do construction administration. If you work for a firm where they do CA, you can get in touch with the person who goes out on the job site, tag along with them, and get your 360 hours fairly easily. But if you work at a design firm that doesn't do construction administration, this is going to be more difficult. So of all the categories that we've looked at here, all those other tasks can be done right there in the office. This category number 6, you actually have to go out to job sites in order to get this accomplished. So kind of keep that in mind when you're working at a firm, even if it's just a student internship. These hours that we're documenting here, these can come from time where you're not a full-time employee, but you might just be a student intern. You can still engage in this AXP and start documenting the tasks that you're doing. But when you're working at a firm, any opportunity you can get to go out to a job site, see if you can take advantage of that. Actively find people who are going out to the job site to review things and ask if you can tag along with them. Chances are they're happy to have you. Chances are they want you there. They will explain the different things that you're seeing. They will educate you as you're out in the field. Okay, so meeting with contractors, those are the people building your structure. The client is the person who owns the structure, who's paying all the bills. Building officials from the city. Punching lists. Punch lists are just lists of tasks that need to be done at a given point in time in the construction of a project. And typically, you go through the clipboard and a list of tasks that have to be done, and you just kind of verify whether or not those tasks have been done. Verify to the best of your ability. There may be things that you can't visibly see, uh, but it's kind of punching lists is just going through and crossing off items off a checklist that should be done by this point in time. Or if they're not done by this point in time, making a note of it so they will get accomplished. This is the website. Again, I'm not gonna click on this website. Download this PowerPoint presentation. You can click on all these links. But this is the NCARB website, National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, and this is an explanation of the AXP program, the Architectural Experience Program, how to get it up and running, how to set up an account with them. I think you submit some paperwork and you pay a fee. I think actually the architecture firm that you're working at will pay that fee for you. Typically, that's what they do. Um, but this is the website where you can get a full explanation of the AXP process and get an explanation of how to go about setting up an account with NCARB to do this. Those are the first two things you have to do. Get a master's degree in architecture and engage and complete the architectural experience program. The third thing is the biggie. This is the ARE. This is the architectural record exam. This is the test, and you got to pass the test. The ARE is administered by NCARB, and the results of your tests are sent to the Texas Board of Architectural Examiners, the TBAE. So the NCARB is a national organization. NCARB is located in Washington, D.C., and they administer the exam for all 50 states. You taking the test here in Texas, NCARB will grade the test and submit the results to the local Texas oversight board, which is known as the TBAE. The TBAE oversees the architectural registration process here in the state of Texas. The ARE can be taken after the attainment of a master's degree in architecture and after 6 months of documented AXP experience. So this is a nice development. When I was going through the process to get licensed, you had to get your master's degree first. You had to complete the entire architecture experience program, all 3,000 hours of that before you were eligible to take the test. Now they've loosened the rules a little bit, and you can start taking your ARE exams, and it's a series of exams. It's actually a series of tests. You can start taking those tests after only 6 months of documented AXP experience. Now, in order to get registered as an architect, you have to complete all these tasks. You have to have the master's degree in architecture. You have to complete all of your documented AXP hours, and you have to successfully pass your architectural record exam. You have to do all those things to become registered as an architect. But what's nice is the rules now allow you to start taking the exam tests at an earlier point in time. You only have to have 6 months of documented AXP experience to start taking the tests. The ARE, Architectural Record Exam, is actually comprised of 6 divisions that must be passed in a 5-year time frame. You've got 6 tests, and from the moment you start taking test number 1, you've got 5 years to pass all these things. If you fail one of your tests, you can retake it, but you've got to wait 6 months before being eligible to retake it. So these are the 6 different tests that you need to take and pass to complete the architectural record exam. Project management, practice management, project management, programming and analysis, project planning and design, project development and documentation, and construction and evaluation. Do these 6 categories look familiar? They should. It's the same 6 categories that you've documented your hours in for the architectural experience program. So the ARE is coordinated with the AXP. Everything kind of fits neatly with each other, ensuring that you're going to be getting experience in those areas that are necessary in order to run an architectural practice. Like I said, once you start taking your first exam, it's like the meter is running in a taxi cab. You now the clock is ticking. You've got 5 years to pass all these things. In general, you have to apply. You got to fill out some paperwork online, I think, to set up taking one of these tests. There's a fee that goes with it. Um, when I took the test, back in 2006, 2007. Each test cost roughly about $200 to take. And a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, if you're working at a design firm, they will pay your fee to take each of these tests. I think they'll only pay for one go round. If they paid for you to take a test and you fail the test, and then 6 months later you have to retake the test, I think the second time you have to pay for that fee out of pocket. But just in generally speaking, in general terms, the architectural firm that you work for will usually uh, pay for one go round taking these tests. These tests, it's only 6 tests. You've got 5 years to take them, but it's really easy to let this slide. Once you start taking the test, it's really easy to kind of forget about this. You may take test number 1, pass it, and then you're working at a design firm and you're making money and you're enjoying what you're doing, you're keeping busy, and you start to forget about taking the tests. And this happens for real. And then at some point in time you realize, oh my gosh, 4 years have gone by, and now I've got 1 year to take the remaining 5 tests. I would recommend, don't let this slide. When you're at the point where you're getting ready to take your first test, work out some kind of schedule for yourself. Be disciplined about this. Don't let this slide. Don't forget about it. Don't try and put this off until the last minute. Here's one of the heartbreaking aspects of taking the ARE. If you take these tests and you successfully take and pass these tests, but if you don't complete all 6 of them by the time your 5-year window is up, then you have to start all over again from scratch. So any tests that you've already passed, those get erased, and you start over with the tests from the beginning. So if you've taken and passed 5 of the tests and your 5 years expire, it's as though you've taken 0 tests and you have to start over again. Please don't put yourself in that position. And that happens to people. It's really, life gets in the way of stuff like this. It's really easy to forget about stuff like this, especially if you're working and enjoying what you're doing and keeping busy, and you're making some good money as an architectural designer. It's really easy to kind of forget about this stuff. Don't let that happen to you. Keep on top of this. This is the website. Again, you can download this PowerPoint and go here. But this is information from the NCARB website, National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. And NCARB has information here on getting set up to start taking the architectural record exam, the ARE. Okay, once you've completed all 3 of those tasks, and right now it may sound like a monumental task. It might sound like just a whole impossible mountain of stuff that you need to do, but you can do this. If you take it one step at a time and you stay focused and you stay driven, you can do this. But once you've got your master's in architecture, you've completed your AXP, and you've successfully passed your ARE exams, you are now a registered architect. That's not the end of the story or the end of the process. This is what you have to do after registration. Once you've become an architect, you have to keep your architectural license. So after you've become registered, 12 documented hours of continuing education activities each calendar year pertaining to the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants of buildings. So every year, between January 1st and December 31st, you have to engage in 12 documented hours of continuing education in architecture. Of these 12 hours, at least one, has to pertain to barrier-free design, which otherwise known as accessibility issues, designing to make your spaces uh, easily utilized by people with disabilities. And one of your continuing education hours must pertain to sustainable or energy efficiency in design. So, of your 12 documented continuing education hours each year, you've got to devote at least one of those to accessible design and one of those to energy efficient design. So you have to every year, I think every year, like in the month that where your birthday falls, you have to renew your architectural license. You have to send in a fee to the Texas Board of Architectural Examiners, the TBAE. You have to send them a fee. And then they also ask you, do you certify that in the previous year you have 12 documented hours of continuing education? And you hit the check mark for the box for yes. Every few years they may come back to you and say, we're going to audit your file. Show us the documentation that last year you did 12 hours of continuing education activities. In every instance, when you do continuing education, whether it's a lunchtime seminar or an online webinar or a class that you go to, at the conclusion of that activity, they will email you some kind of certificate showing on such and such a date you got 1 hour or 2 hours in for continuing education for architecture. It may even say this hour was devoted to barrier-free design, or this hour was devoted to energy efficiency in design. But you'll get a certificate, usually emailed to you, for each uh, uh, continuing education activity you've done in architecture. So if you ever do get audited, all you got to do is put all those, those PDF files of all those certificates, put them together in an email and just send it to the whoever at the TBAE is asking for it. And that does the trick. They just want to verify that indeed you're doing this stuff. And that happens rarely. Every few years they may audit your file and ask for that. After you've become a registered architect, you may very well want to join an organization known as the AIA. If you've gotten any emails from me, you'll see that after my name on my title block, it says Douglas Vail, AIA NCARB. That means I'm a member of the AIA and I'm a member of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. The AIA stands for American Institute of Architects. If you are a registered architect, you can put the letters AIA after your name. If you are not a registered architect, if you're just out of school and you haven't gotten licensed yet, you can still join the AIA, but you are an associate member of the AIA. So after your name, you could put Associate AIA. But the AIA is kind of the advocacy group for architects. The AIA is a lobbying group down in Austin. They are also in Washington, D.C., but they advance legislation that helps architects. They are in your corner. They make sure that state and federal laws that are being enacted uh, protect architects or are respective of the interest of architects. If you're a member of the AIA, they have all sorts of conferences and seminars. They have subscriptions to magazines. It really helps you keep on top of the architectural industry. If you set up your own practice, if you want to go into business for yourself as an architect and you're a member of the AIA, they have all sorts of blank legal documents and contracts that you can download and use when signing deals with clients or signing deals with contractors, that sort of thing. And all these documents are set up to protect you, the architect. They're set up to be in favor of you, the architect. So it's a really good thing to be associated with. It's an advocacy group in favor of architects. Two websites I have listed on here, AIA.org and AIADallas.org. The AIA is just the federal version. The AIA.org, when you're a member, that is the group in Washington, D.C. that lobbies Congress. And then each big city in the United States has their own chapter of the AIA. So there's actually one in Dallas, and there's also one in Fort Worth. Within 45 miles of each other, we've got two major chapters of the AIA. So if you get licensed as an architect and remain in North Texas, you could be a member of either one of those two chapters, just depending on where you end up residing. And the last thing I wanted to leave you with is two questions here. One, why does the state of Texas, or any state in the United States, why does the state register architects? Think about that. Why go through all the trouble? Why does the state of Texas care that you have a master's degree in architecture? Why is the state of Texas making you go through 3,700 hours of documented experience in all these different aspects of architecture? Why does the state of Texas care that you've taken and passed these 6 licensing exams? What is it? How does that benefit the state? Why are they concerned with that? The reason is the insurance industry. In Prior to the late 1800s, you really didn't need to do much to become an architect and legally call yourself an architect. Prior to the late 1800s, if you wanted to become an architect, you might, as a young person, go to work for an architect and just kind of be an intern at their office until you felt that you had done enough design work that you were ready to start out on your own as an architect, and you would leave and set up your own little practice. That was about it, just getting some practice working in an architect's office. Then in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were a series of disasters that insurance companies had to pay out on. In 1871, there was a devastating fire that burned down most of the city of Chicago. In 1906, there was a huge, devastating earthquake in San Francisco. There were assorted other disasters in which people lost their lives, primarily in buildings that weren't designed well, buildings that didn't have enough emergency exits or ways to get out or ways to protect themselves against disasters. And the insurance companies had to pay out on all of these claims. And they didn't like that. It cost them a fortune to do this. So the insurance industry came down hard on state legislatures and said, if you want us to provide insurance coverage for buildings, you have to ensure that the people designing the buildings know what they're doing. You have to set up a system so that the people designing the buildings know how to design buildings so they're safe, so they're solid, so they're strong, so they can resist this, so they are less inclined to get destroyed in a natural disaster, and we won't have to pay out as much money. So really, it's a result of pressure from the insurance industry that made states turn around and say, okay, we have to set up a system where architects are trained in a consistent manner. They know how to design buildings that ensure the safety of the occupants of those buildings. So that's why the state registers architects. It's been going on for about 120 years or so, and it is kind of a consistent way for state governments to oversee and ensure that architects know what they're doing and they're designing buildings that protect as best they can the safety of the occupants of those buildings. Goes back to a term here, HSW, health, safety, and welfare. That's what we're doing. The buildings that we're designing need to the best of our ability, protect the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants. And then finally, the last question, why would your firm, if you're working for a design firm, why would they want you to get registered as an architect? I mentioned earlier that a lot of firms, not all of them, but a lot of them, will pay for you to pay the entry fee for you to take your licensing exams. A lot of firms will put together study groups for all the architectural interns who are all taking the test to kind of get together and use study index cards and study. A lot of firms have studying materials to help you prepare for your exams. And like I said, a lot of times if you ask someone at your firm if you can go to the job site with them, they're more than happy to take you out on a field visit and explain construction techniques and what you're seeing. That's a lot of effort on your firm's part. They really want you to get registered as an architect. But I'm going to ask you, why is that? Why do they care if you get registered as an architect? Think about that for a second. The reason that when it comes right down to it, it may be that your firm is full of really nice, good-hearted people. It might just be the fact that your firm is a whole bunch of nice people. But there's also a money aspect to it. The more registered architects a firm has on its staff, the more money they can charge to a client for doing design work. So if you are working as the designer on a project and you are just an architectural intern, you've got your master's degree in architecture, but you haven't done the test, you haven't gotten registered as an architect yet. You are what's considered to be an architectural intern. They charge X number of dollars to the client for every hour that you are working on their project. If, on the other hand, you are a registered architect, they might be able to charge the client twice as much money because they you now they now have a registered architect doing the design work on the project. You may be doing the exact same tasks. You, as an architect, might be doing the exact same task you would be doing as an architectural intern, but the amount of money per hour that your firm is able to charge to the client might be double what it was. So the more architects that a firm has working on its design projects, the higher the fee they can charge to the client. And that makes sense. All the time and effort and expense that it takes to become an architect, that gets passed on to the client, and that's a totally legal and legitimate way to bill a client for your architectural firm's time. So the more architects on staff, the greater the rate of pay, or the greater the rate that a firm can charge per hour to its clients. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the process, how to get registered as an architect in the state of Texas.